Welcome to the Optimal You YouTube segment right here on HGG Radio. You know, we focus on wellness of the mind, the body, and the spirit. And it's time for conversation. Today, I'm so glad that you have chosen to join with me, and we are going to have a good conversation. Did I say we're going to have a good conversation? We are going to have an excellent conversation. We know we don't do interviews over here, we do conversations. So, in this special conversation segment, we are going to be partnering with Activate Core Virtual Book Tour to spotlight incredible authors whose works inspire growth, healing, and purpose. Now, listen, these writers don't just tell stories, they share insights that empowers us to live more intentionally and wholeheartedly. So, whether you're tuning in for motivation, transformation, or a deeper dive into purposeful living, you're in the right place. Now, get ready to meet the minds behind the pages and discover what it means to live the optimal you. Now, my conversation today is with a lady. She has expanded herself, but we are not here to talk about her expansion altogether, but we are here to talk about a dynamic project that she has. And so, without any further ado, because you know I talk all day, right? Without further ado, I'm going to invite our guest up and she's going to introduce herself, tell us where she lives, and any other juicy information she wants to give us before we get into the thick of things. Okay? All right. All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Mr. Rene. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm way on the other side. I'm 9 hours ahead of you. So for me, it's evening.
Uh, let me
But
say
I'm
good
well. I'm well, thank you.
So tell us about yourself, your name, and where you live, and if there's any other thing that you think we should know, feel free to tell us.
Okay. So my name is Diana Powell, and I currently live in the UAE. I've been living here now for 5 years, 2 years in Saudi Arabia. I'm out here. I'm an education consultant. I've been in education for the last 20 years. But I'm also an entrepreneur. I've run my own consultancy and also a holistic business coach as well. I'm also a director of True Eternal Life, a holistic African Caribbean holistic health store and online business. So I have a few strings to my bow, but as you can tell from my accent, I'm born and bred in London. My parents are from Jamaica, Manchester, and Trelawney, and my grandparents migrated to the UK in the 1950s, part of the Reconstruction era post-war Britain. So that's me. And I can even take it even further from that. My father is from Trelawney and descendants of the Maroons. So I can even take it even further than that. There's a lot of this, what I'm talking about, will manifest itself in also my book.
Mm. Welcome to the maroon world. So am I. My mother is maroon. So
Okay.
yeah.
So you have that, is that fighting spirit, right?
I tell you, I think I have too much fight. But we want to get into a conversation today. May I call you Diana?
That's fine. That's fine.
Great. So now you have written a book. You've written a book, and the first part of the book, or the first name, is quite inspiring or quite catching, Afro. And I know many persons, once they see Afro, the black people, we want to see what this is about. But you've written this book, Afro in the Boardroom. Now, the question I want to ask you, was there a defining moment that led you to put pen and paper to this particular book?
Yes. The thing is, this particular book of mine has many layers. And as I mentioned, I'm an educationalist, but I'm also a business consultant. So I've been a business consultant for over 20 years in the UK, West Africa, and the Caribbean. So I support micro businesses charitable organizations, social enterprises, and also corporate leaders. And somebody actually asked me, after all those years, you've consulted, you've trained, you've coached, why don't you write a book? So I never really thought of writing a book per se. It just I just loved what I do. But then I've always thought about, well, okay, I'm very much about legacy. I'm very much about leaving something behind. So I wanted to write a book, but initially it was going to be a business manual. And then I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, because I'm known to have a particular hairstyle. Today I've got my hair in my wrap today, but I normally have my hair out in an afro. So he was jokingly saying, why don't you call it Afro in a space, Afro? So we were just tossing around with words. We were just messing about. But then I thought to myself, you know what? My hair has always been my signature style. People always know me when I turn up in spaces, when I train. My hair is one of the things that's always been a talking point. So, okay, I said, okay, let's call it something a bit catchy. So I decided, well, okay, I'm going to call it Afro. But then I decided, well, okay, Afro in a boardroom, because it kind of rang together. But then I said to myself, when I speak about boardroom, or when people speak about boardroom, it's very corporate, it's very hard, and can be very cold. But that's not really me per se. That doesn't make up my authentic self. So this book has been in the making for the last 10 years. I've picked it up, I put it down. I've picked it up, I put it down. Because there was something that didn't quite connect with me when I first put pen to paper. I drafted it so many times, but it just couldn't connect. And then one day, it's funny enough, one day I was, because we have church online, because where I am, we have church online. And so just before this is about 3 years ago, just before I decided to jump online, there was a book in front of me. The author was Steve Bartlett, and he wrote a book called Diary of a CEO. And he wrote this book from a particular narrative, from his life experiences. So it was a manual, but through a particular lens. And I said to myself, I want to write my book like that. I want to write about my journey, my authentic self, through a particular lens. So when I now speak about the boardroom, I speak about the boardroom not just from the corporate perspective. It's places and spaces where decisions are made, where challenges are, but where you can also excel. Afro now links more to not just my hair, it's my authentic self, it's my heritage, it's my African self, it's my Caribbean self. And I interwove that through my narrative of how I started out as a businesswoman to where I am now. And everything I do, whether it's I'm in a training session, coaching session, whether I'm running my holistic business with my family, it's all about support. It's all about transforming. It's all about being intentional with everything I do. It's all about authentic self. So Afro in a boardroom captures all of that and more through my lens navigating this world.
You kind of answered question number 2 as well, because I really want to ask you, what does it symbolize for you personally? And you really stated that. You stated that, and you said you were inspired to write this book based on all that you've garnered over the years.
Yes.
Thing.
And
But go ahead.
No, as I was going to say, because, most of the clients that I have worked with have been from the African or African Caribbean communities. And so initially when I started out, I was contracted to work for a number of government agencies in the UK. And the reason why they developed these type of initiatives was because there are communities that, first of all, couldn't access finance, had challenges setting up their businesses, a lot of barriers and obstacles that hindered them to be successful in developing a business or expanding their business. And majority of the people that I consulted were from the African Caribbean Black community. So most of my services are targeted in relation to those communities, because they for them, there are many barriers to entry into set up their business, barriers in terms of accessing finance. There's so many issues, and I'm not even talking about the workplace yet, right? Mm-hmm. So Afro means a lot to me in terms of, I wanted to connect more in terms of that authentic self. And the reason why I touched on my grandparents coming in, who arrived in the UK post-war Britain, it was because I wanted to start the book by understanding where my authentic self had come from, where that drive had come from, why I decided to focus on this particular group of people. My grandparents came in at a time where there's a lot of racism in Britain. They encountered notices, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. But they had to navigate this world. They were property owners, and they were businessmen and women. He was a businessman. My grandmother, she grew up 12 children, and she supported him, but in a world that wasn't welcoming. So when you roll back to now, the world hasn't changed that much. But we had to have a certain type of character, a certain type of resilience as businessmen and women to navigate. But we have to also go back, Sankofa, to understand what our foreparents went through. That's why I mentioned about the Maroons. We had to fight. You know, that fighting spirit, because we live in the West, because it seems that we are flourishing, that's not necessarily the case. Because there's a lot of trauma in the workplace. There's a lot of trauma that entrepreneurs go through. And that's another reason why I wrote this book as a manual for navigation, to understand what this trauma looks like, to understand what the realities are for us as a people in these places and spaces.
In your book, you explore the unique challenges faced by Black professionals in the corporate spaces. What are some of the recurring patterns that you've noticed?
You know, in my book, there's a number of chapters that highlight stories, that I've encountered. And the thing is, the book is actually quite therapeutic, because you don't really necessarily know you're encountering until you have some sort of reflection. And this is how subtle sometimes it can actually be in the corporate spaces and places and for entrepreneurs. One of the chapters I write about is it's about my encounter as a young woman. My first role in a corporate space in London back in the 90s. And the chapter is geared around the white woman. And it was quite interesting, because back then, people could consider me a bit radical because of my thinking and my approach, but that was very much grounded in, I knew who I was. I was very, very no nonsense. And this is something that was ingrained in me by my parents, to have that confidence, to stand up for yourself, to shine in those spaces that not necessarily always want to see you shine and thrive. So this particular encounter was geared around a lady. For me, you can't see because I'm sitting down. I'm nearly 6 foot tall, right? And she was only 5 foot, but there was something about her, the dynamics, that she she did everything she could to put me down, put it away. We will call it microaggressions, by the language she spoke. You know, it's by her the job roles she would give to me, the subtleness of maneuvering me in spaces where I would be given the menial jobs. And you know, I was considered confrontational because I didn't understand why was it always me who's always in these particular situations. And you know, I had to navigate this this dance with her, thinking that you know, I deserve better than this. So I talk about microaggressions, what it looks like, how subtle it can be. I talk about the racist rhetorics that is in corporate culture that sometimes we don't understand, but we feel it here. As Black people, we feel, we know there's something wrong, but sometimes because it pays the bills, because sometimes we don't want to rock the boat, sometimes because we don't want to stand out. But then within the book and some of the chapters I talk about, we as younger versions of ourselves, we are so vibrant, we are fearless, we are filled with confidence.
Yeah.
It happens to us. Something, when we go into these boardrooms, places and spaces in adulthood, something happens to us. So I speak through my chapters, through my lens, through some of the examples of the culture of what we're stepping into. But what's important, that after the chapters, there are lessons from the boardroom. What is it that you can learn from these encounters, from these chapters, that you can get a better understanding of self, of these situations, and some of these scenarios that play out in front of us that we don't quite understand.
So obviously your life in the UK and the UAE has really been a part of influencing your influence rather in writing this book, because your experiences
Yes.
that you've had really played a pivotal role in terms of what you're going to put in this book. And so it's really almost like an experience. So I want to tell you
Yes,
what's happened so you can be aware and not
that's
be
correct.
blindsided. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
What role does identity and representation play in the professional growth of a Black woman, especially in leadership? What role can we say that identity and representation plays?
You know, it's quite interesting you say that. I open up my chapter, and I mention in chapter 1 Afro to CEO. I was born in the 70s, but I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Those were my younger years and my teenage years. The reason why I speak about the importance of family is that when we were growing up, we didn't consider ourselves as Black British. Our grandparents grew us up as Jamaicans with a strong cultural identity, to have confidence in yourself in adversity, and always stand up for yourself. The communities that were around me was, you know, family wasn't just about blood, it was about community, and we looked out for each other. So I start from that because in self and identity you anchor yourself, your ideas, your ideals, your values are formed. How you interact with other people, how you view yourself, those are anchored in some of those formative years.
True.
Rolling through now, when you leave the confines of your family, and then you go into the world, you're going to encounter situations in life that's going to throw you off path. Right? You're gonna because that is not what you were anchored in.
Yes, some familiar territory.
That's what I'm saying. So now, if you are not anchored solid in and seeded properly in those formative years, you're gonna come up against situations that you're not gonna be steady. When you go into the corporate world, again, in my story, a lot of the times I'm the one of many. There's only one of me you're going to see, or if you see me look like me, probably two of us in there. So you're leaving the confines of your culture, your family, going into another type of culture that has been set in a certain way that doesn't always receive you well. So we're talking about going in with an armor. That's why I talk about the authentic self, understanding who you are. So when you do have these encounters, you're not going to shrink and shy away. Media sometimes show women, yes, Black women in sometimes very negative, subservient roles. Some of us take these on, and sometimes these roles play themselves out in the boardroom places and spaces. But when you are secure in yourself and your identity, it doesn't matter who you come up against. Yeah, you're anchored. You know how to deal with people. Sometimes people, as my grandmother said, don't you know who to frighten, right? So if you turn up and they sense that, well, okay, this is somebody I can push over, they will push you over. The corporate world is a rough world, and you have to have thick skin. If not, you could be crushed. There's many women in the corporate world and leadership that have been given tasks and roles. Sometimes it's so beyond their capacity, meaning they give them unrealistic duties and tasks and responsibilities that not even other people can acquire those or achieve those. And so if you are not rooted and understand yourself and know how to speak up, know how to challenge without feeling that you're being a threat, these are the things that we have to armor ourselves. These are the things that we need to tell the youngsters that's going into these places and spaces. We're not being confrontational with these. We're just being our self.
But you are saying no, so it's a possibility that these persons might end up with some kind of a trauma and become, instead of pushing forward, they shirk back. But the question I want to ask you is, what are some strategies, some key strategies that individuals can, let me see, it's in your book, I think, for building confidence and influence in the boardroom. What are some key strategies that persons can use? Because you're telling me that I can be confronted with these things when I get into that space, probably being the only dark skin, probably the only one with any energy to want to push forward, but because, you're confronted with these things, you're constantly being pushed down. What are some key strategies that individuals can use?
One of the things I talk about is mentorship. I talk about, in one of the chapters, finding alliances. There was a manager. There's two managers, actually. One was a Black man, and actually one was a white guy, funny enough, right? That I had to be able to confide in somebody, because sometimes you think that it's in your head. Sometimes you're so engrossed in what's taking place, you can't think. So I speak about finding mentors. If you can find a mentor or someone, a colleague, somebody that you can confide in, because a lot of times we're in these spaces and it just feels like you're so alone. And when you're in a space like that, you just, many of us will go into a state of depression, We feel alone. We can't thrive. We cannot even think about doing the work, and we're just constantly on a treadmill. So one of the things I speak about is finding a mentor, somebody that you can confide in the workplace, in the boardroom. If you cannot find somebody in the workplace or boardroom, there are business men and women who are coaches that deal with corporate trauma and can help you to guide you through these spaces. One of the things I always talk about is journaling. I talk about taking time out to reflect on some of those situations that you're actually going through. And in that, you kind of start to recognize certain patterns of behaviors that you also demonstrate. And, you know, we also talk about triggers. Yeah. What is it about that space or place that you're in that triggers you to behave the way you are behaving? Sometimes those triggers are rooted in our formative years that we also bring into these spaces. There are situations in our lives that we have never dealt with that we're bringing into these spaces. And this is why we always talk about mentoring and coaching and support. One of the things that I also managed to acquire when I was in these spaces is sister circles as well. Developing relationships with like-minded women who's in the leadership roles or in business and enterprise outside of the corporate boardroom. It gives us time to discuss some in safe spaces, some of the challenges that we're going through. And then you actually realize that it's not necessarily always unique to yourself. I know sometimes it may feel that, well, it's a bit of a relief, it's just me, but it's not about that also. It's about being able to be in safe spaces where you can talk through some of your challenges. Other sisters or those in your networks can give you some advice about how to deal with this. The other thing is, I always say, is sometimes when we are in a place in our minds where we are totally stressed and it can be very traumatic for us, one of the things you need to look at is your health. Because even in your health, you know, when you are stressed, you tend not to exercise, you tend not to eat the right foods, and then you're on a constant treadmill of issues to do with your health. Because when you're in stress, it means high blood pressure. Sometimes it could be diabetes. You can get migraines. And you just cannot function. So one of the things is also understand your numbers in terms of your health and wellness. Because sometimes even when we are being stressed out, again, we're in a constant cycle because the body is in a traumatic state. You need to find out what is wrong with you physically, find a way to heal physically. Yes. That also helps support you mentally and also your emotions to be able to balance you out. So these are some examples I give, but there's also some other examples I also give in the book.
Wow. And those don't just connect with the boardroom, you know. Those things also connect with persons on the outside. Just functioning in the space as a woman who wants to achieve.
That's right.
Simply as a woman who wants to achieve, you're also confronted with these elements of persons putting you down or, you know, the struggles. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you know, we always, as Black women, we are very innovative and we're very, very creative. And sometimes we can also be very emotional beings as well. And sometimes people can knock us back. And that's why I always say sometimes when you have your ideas, be careful who you relay your ideas to. Be careful who you're sharing these with, because not everybody is there to be a champion for you. And that's why I talk about sisterhood in my chapter, about women that have your back, women that turn up in spaces and speak for you, women that don't judge you, women that you can speak to and confide, and you know they really have you.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, how do you balance the call for professionalism with the need for authenticity, especially for a Black woman who often feels they must code switch?
You know, what's interesting, right, with the code switching
Yeah.
is there was a chapter I actually speak on that. And again, when you go into any space, you naturally will gravitate to people that you can relate to, right? Whether it's your fellow countrymen, whether it's another female or another Black woman or another, do you know what I'm saying? You naturally, or people with the same interests, yeah? And so I speak about in one of my corporate spaces, I was brought into my manager's office, but this particular manager was also like my mentor. And I never forget this conversation, because it was like, Diana, I just need you to sit down with me. I just need to have a conversation with you. And I'm just like, okay, all right. People in the office, again, it was one of those spaces where I was in the minority. So the conversation now was, there's talks around that you don't like white people. I'm like, I don't understand. It's that, because you only seem to gravitate to or speak to only the Black members of staff. But I've said, well, I don't understand, because I can relate to them. Exactly. We have things in common. Because I was young in my younger years. There was things that we could have a conversation about. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I speak about that is that you have groups and you have clusters, and that's a corporate culture. That's okay. The managers will gravitate to the managers. The other communities will, but it doesn't mean that you don't hate. It's who you gravitate to. So he was like, well, don't you think you need to, speak to others, include them in your circle? And I said, I don't understand why I need to do that. Because why? When I see them outside of corporate spaces, they see me and walk past me. They don't see me. So they don't, but it's okay for them to be able to relate to those around them. But for me, there seems to be a problem. This is something that plays itself out quite a bit in boardroom spaces, to the point where some of us as Black professionals don't even want to link or be seen to be linking with each other in corporate spaces, so not to be seen as a threat by others who don't understand the kind of relationships we have. And it goes back to what I said about Black people and community.
But it works the same way, though. It works the same way with the white persons, because they tend to cling with those in their.
And that's what I'm saying, is there's no problem. So going back to now the code switching, yeah. So one of the things he said to me is, you need to understand how to play the game. And I was like, what game are you talking about? What game are you talking about? Remember, I'm in my authentic self. I don't see the reason why I need to play the game.
Pretend,
That's the saying that they have. Yeah. However, as Black professionals, to get through some of these glass ceilings, there is a corporate culture that a lot of the times it's never documented. It's just in your surroundings. It's how people talk. It's how people behave, and it's how people navigate in these boardroom places and spaces. Now, if you don't fit that profile, a lot of the times you have a hard time navigating promotional opportunities. Some of the pressures and stresses and traumas that we have at times is about coming out of that authentic self, or that who we are. And the code switching is having to switch from who you are into another narrative, into another, sometimes in the way we speak, in the way we dress, in the way we have our hair. It's for some people, that in itself causes trauma and stress to the physical self, to the emotional self, to the mental self. Having to every day, it's like every day you put on your clothes, you go into this space, and hey, how you doing? How you doing, Sally? How you doing, Roger? How you feeling? How's things? Even your voice goes up. Because if we as Black people, we naturally have a deeper type of voice, which sometimes when you talk and you talk like this, for some people, we become threatening. So we have learned to talk with our voice higher, tone higher, to make others feel comfortable.
Less of you and more for them, eh? And
can
that's
you
why
imagine what is this
themselves.
doing to you over time? What is this doing to you over time?
Lose yourself.
I speak about the idea of we have choices. And that's why I talk a lot about entrepreneurship. We need to sometimes, again, I'm talking about this from a particular lens. Yeah. Where I always say is if people are, if you're in a space, in a boardroom, and you're not welcome, you can leave. Again, it's about strategy. It's about how you go about this. How do you think about an exit strategy out of those kind of places and spaces? Many times we turn up and they're not always welcoming, but people also say, then we have to pay the bills. Then you're paying bills, but what are you also paying? Your health is being compromised. Your authenticity is being compromised now. Many Black professionals have high blood pressure, diabetes, burnout, trying to fit into these corporate places and spaces. One of the things as a consultant, I've met many who now are making that transition out because it's not worth it no more. How much of yourself do you have to now give up to be able to pay your bills? But your health comes first, your sanity.
Talk about that.
Your sanity. So these are as a consultant, as a business holistic coach, I come across and support these men and women, and these are their stories. Again, I'm not speaking for everybody. Afro in the boardroom is not for everyone.
That's what I believe.
It's only for those that can resonate for what I'm saying.
Some persons
for
might,
some, for others, it's okay, and that's okay because it's about choice.
Yeah.
But you have a choice to stay, and you also have a choice to leave.
That runs me into that.
Welcome.
Yeah, that runs me into the other question, because you talk about some persons will agree, some persons will not agree. It's for you, it may not be for me. You know what I mean? But what has the responses been like? As it relates to your book, what have your readers been saying about Afro in the boardroom?
Okay, with the book itself, the book, I'm actually the book is going to be launched end of summer. So it's on pre-order. But what I'm actually doing right now, there's webinars, there's blogs that take portions and snippets of the book, secreting that out. I'm trying to build conversations with men and women around some of these chapters, because there is a lot happening right now. There's a lot of talks right now around diversity, about inclusion right now. This is, I know this is happening in the UK, about Black professionals and how they are treated. You know, you talk about cultural intelligence, that, you know, as corporations or boardroom spaces, you need to understand your staff, your people, the kind of strategies that you need to put in place to support them, to allow them to thrive in those type of environments. And the reasons why these initiatives, these strategies, these policies are being put in place, because they understand there is discrimination, inequality that is actually taking place, and more people are speaking out about it now. I recently wrote a blog about narcissistic managers or leaders, and a young lady, she wrote back and said she was very inspired by that, because, you know, she had a manager that, you know, showed many of the traits that I was referring to. And she said, oh my God, this is like, you know, I knew there was something wrong with her, right? Because when I used to confront her, you know, she always used to shy away from the blame. She used to be blaming me. And then when I do confront her, she's like, she want to cry. And you know, so those are strategies of those types of personalities that we encounter. And a lot of the times we don't even know we're encountering it. But it's about understanding those types of personalities and how to be able to navigate. So through the blogs, through the webinars, through conversations like we're having now, I'm secreting elements of the book, and those are the conversations that are taking place right now.
It's a wonderful strategy, because persons' palates are getting wet, and so when the book is actually released, you're going to be eating it up.
I hope so. But it's again, it's, I see it as a way to navigate. It's because at the end of each chapter, Afro in a Boardroom is also about reflection. It's about looking at yourself honestly in the mirror. It's asking some of those questions. And one of the questions I ask myself is, what happened? It's built on 3 pillars: transformation, authenticity, and intentionality. Beautiful. Transformation is when you get to that point where your back is against the wall, and whether it's your health, whether it's just you've come to a point where you just can't cope, there needs to be a point where you have to say to yourself, what happened? What happened to me? Because you wasn't always like this. Something happened to you, which you are now playing out in these places and spaces. So being able to transform now, the strategies that we speak about is about the transformation of self. What does that now look like? What person now can you become? How can I overcome this?
Yeah.
I speak about
your conversation. You know that our time has gone. I'm so engrossed in the conversation, and I'm just I'm just so getting into this, because I'm like, and I just glanced. He didn't say, I said, oh, I didn't. We are so glad.
That's fine.
Oh my goodness. Listen, people, Hold on. But I want to know what's next for you while I show the viewers the book. What's next for you?
Okay. So I would encourage people to go to my website, www.dspowell.com.
Mm-hmm.
On my website, you have a link to pre-order this book, but also to subscribe as well, because there's a number of webinars that will be taking place over the next few months, and you can get free access to those. There's also a mini book that will touch on corporate leadership and how to navigate some of the challenges that we are encountering. So there's a lot of freebies for signing up. And there will also be the announcement. There's going to be an event happening in terms of the book launch at the end of summer as well. So really, it's about going to the website, www.dspowell.com, to find out more information about what is going to be happening.
Beautiful. 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 People, we have we were so consumed in the conversation. Listen, time ran out, but listen, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's good when the time run out on good stuff, okay? But I want to say it has been sheer pleasure talking to you, Diana. Really, very inspiring, very encouraging, makes me, even though I'm not in the boardroom, but I know some of those things kind of connected, because sometimes you're trying to achieve, but the space that you're in, instead of pushing you up and elevating you, you feel as if you're being pulled down and silenced and cornered, you know? So really, really encouraging, really encouraging. So persons can go to your website to get info on the book and to get some freebies and to also see what you are up to. It's been great.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to hearing about the launch at the end of summer. God bless you and have an outstanding rest of evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Bye, darling. People, lost. We ran out of time. But that was good stuff, you know. Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. So I'm encouraging you to be on the watch. Once you subscribe to Diana's on her website, you know, when the book releases there, you're gonna know, right? You're gonna be up to date. Wonderful, beautiful. Black women, it is time to rise. You know, I'm all about the women, you know that. It's time to get up and get into the thick of things, and don't be short back. God has given you giftings and abilities that the world is waiting for. And if you're short back, it won't happen. You understand what I'm saying? It won't happen. Wonderful. I love it. Did I say I love it already? I love it again. Yes. So we're going to go. I'm your life coach and host, Minister Renee. It has been wonderful talking to you, sharing with you. This conversation was one of the bosses. Yeah? We've had some good conversations. Now, remember, go subscribe to her website, Diana Powell, and get your info up. It's time for me to go. Way past my time. Bye, guys. Next time, we'll have more conversation. Until next time, bye-bye. Blessings, much love. Gotta go. Bye.
It's Activate Core Virtual Book Tour 2025 right here on HGG Radio. Stay tuned.